welcome back to day 2 of the first annual Taxationist Theft Fest. I'm your host, Dre, from Drunken Disorderly Media, and I'm here to introduce our first guest of day 2. Before we get into it, I hope you guys enjoyed the first day as much as I did and learned as much as I did. It was great to talk to all the speakers and learn everything. I can't wait to go back and get to watch all the speakers that I didn't get to speak to and host yesterday. That'll be fun. And we look forward to next year when we get to do this somewhere in person. So, all right. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first guest today. It is Andy Doc Melder. Andy is a disabled veteran and former Navy Hospital Corpsman, a husband, father, born and raised in Katy, Texas. He is the founder and chapter president of Veterans for Natural Rights, Texas. He has served as the chapter president for Young Americans for Liberty until he graduated from Sam Houston State University last semester. Andy has been a longtime advocate for the Texas Capitol and fights for legalizing the natural alternatives to fight common disabilities like PTSD and chronic pain. Andy believes wholeheartedly in the fact that plant medicine saved his life and led him towards his current path to start as a business owner of a natural wellness center in his hometown called Greenside Total Wellness. Let's welcome Andy to the show.
Hey, Dre.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing well. Doing awesome, actually. I'm really excited to be here and get started.
Well, it's fabulous to have you. I can't wait to hear what you have to tell us today.
Yeah, excellent. Well, let's just jump right into it then. Hearing the introduction, of course, I wrote for myself, which is strange, but, it actually really inspires me to get this presentation underway because it did. Plant medicines really did save my life. And so that's what this means to me. And that's what this means to a lot of veterans and potentially for everybody else. And of course, an underlying theme here as of liberty. And so the presentation today I'm doing is veterans in plant medicine and what that means for everyone else. And like I said, that underlying liberty theme as a treatment option. And so what I'm going to be talking about, I'll just kind of give you all an introduction about me and my story, what plant medicines are, what we're talking about here, some of the problems veterans face and how plant medicines can help, and what about everybody else? Where do the civilian population fit in to this equation? And also, what am I talking about here? Liberty as a treatment option. So here's a picture of me. Let's say the nitty gritty, young 23-year-old Andy. I have the nickname Doc because I was an able corpsman, which is kind of like a medical role. So in the Navy, we don't have medics, we have corpsmen. So that means you could serve in a hospital capacity, you could serve on a naval ship, and it also means you could get attached to a Marine Corps unit, like I did, and serve with the Marine Corps. So this is actually in Leeds, England, at a gun range, and you can see an Iraqi flag behind you, but that's because we were training for scenarios, and so why not train like you're doing the real thing? I grew up in Katy, played football, rode BMX, hunted, fished, raised pigs and 4-H, FFA, and I was kind of like a pretty typical kid from old Katy and like what used to be a very rough and tumble, semi-rural community. Now it's like this real big suburban sprawl, but it used to be very well surrounded by farmland and stuff like that. And if you can kind of tell what I'm talking about here, I have a black eye in my picture. So that was me. I like to fight. I like to get my hands dirty, and it was a lot of fun. As I said, I am a permanently and totally disabled veteran with PTSD, and I have been working in advocacy statewide since 2016. I started with Houston Normal, working in cannabis advocacy. I've been to the Capitol in 2017 and back in 2019 legislative sessions, working hard to get cannabis legalized in Texas. And then recently graduated with my degree in healthcare administration. which is a big deal to me. And we're going to kind of get into that a little bit. But, you know, I didn't actually graduate from high school. I got my GED. And so for me to go back and then finally graduate from college, I also then tried to go back to college and failed out at one point. So for me to accomplish that, you know, I think is a testament to these plant medicines and what they're capable of. Here's my shameless self-promotion. This is my business, Greenside Total Wellness. It's a work in progress. I just soft launched my website last week. We're going to start looking to turn the business plan over to investment and things like that here pretty soon. My goal is kind of to line up with some of these things that I've learned through plant medicines and spread the word and give people a lot of information and knowledge about what we're learning through natural healing and take that to the public. So that's greensidetw.com. Y'all can visit there. Y'all can see me on social media. I'm not really here to sell my business, but there it is. So check it out, please.
Fine.
This little quote, this is what I use for my inspiration. So I'm going to read this real quick. And I get emotional every time I read it, but whatever. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or woman, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, he at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Told you. These guys behind this quote, a lot of inspiration for why I did this. Quote is from, of course, the famous Teddy Roosevelt, and probably the best president of all time, but whatever. This is like where society should understand we have to fail to succeed. And these guys behind me will never be accused of being cold and timid souls. And so for me to serve with these guys has been an inspiration, because some of these guys are bona fide certified heroes. But anyways, so my story has a lot of that in it, a lot of failure, a lot of shortcoming, but perseverance. When I was about 8 or 9, I was diagnosed with ADHD. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s, when ADHD was kind of becoming the new cool thing. I was the first person I knew diagnosed. Right away, I was thrown to the doctors, the psychiatrist, the Ritalin started flowing, and then the antidepressants. And so I went through this regime of medications and like medical examinations from a really early age. And it was really like this kind of weird experience for me, because I didn't think there was anything wrong with me. You know, I was just like a kid that couldn't sit still in class and had trouble doing his homework, but I could pass all the tests and I could do everything else. So
what we would call a normal kid.
Yeah, I mean, you know, 8 or 9 year old rough and tumble boy, but whatever. So actually, by the age of 13, I found cannabis. I realized it helped my ADHD. I realized it helped me calm down, and it made me feel better. Nothing had ever made me feel better before that. And while I was kind of young and didn't really understand, I mean, it was still the 90s. I mean, California hadn't even got medical yet, I don't think. And so we didn't really understand it as medicine, so to speak, but I knew it helped. I kind of dabbled around in psychedelics at the time, to like around the age 14, 15, but nothing like too heavy and extreme. But despite that, my upbringing in a Southern Baptist religious programming household landed me in West Oaks Rehabilitation Hospital at the age of 15. So like I was just this kid that liked to smoke weed every once in a while. And I was in this facility with heroin addicts, meth heads, crackheads. They were my age, 15 years old, that had been like suicide attempts and all this crazy stuff. And I didn't really understand why I was there. It's like, it's really reminiscent. If you've ever, I mean, I'm sure you have seen the movie Half Baked, when Bob Saget stands up and he's like, have you ever sucked dick for weed? You know? And like, that was me when I was a kid. I was just like, around all these kids, like every time you have to tell like my drug of choice is marijuana, and then they all just laugh at you and you're like, oh my God. But I spent 30 days in inpatient treatment despite that. So I saw the drug war. I saw one end of it. I saw institutionalization and what that does to people. It tore my self-esteem apart. By 18, I was failing out of high school. I was pretty much on a course to just drop out and not finish. But my parents once again sent me away to a military based program for at-risk youth called Seaborn Challenge Corps down in Galveston, Texas. From there, I got my GED and I joined the Navy. So by 19, I was doing direct patient care at Navy Hospital Jacksonville. That's where I started to witness what opioid withdrawals look like, and the terrible treatment towards addicts by hospital staff, that like these addicts come in getting surgery and having to get opiates to deal with it, but then end up, because they're already addicted to opiates, the opiates aren't helping their pain. And so they're kind of becoming complete assholes. But, instead of responding with empathy, staff responds with, well, they should have, never went down that road in the first place. And a lot of these guys didn't choose that route, right? So I also witnessed my first patient death from a gastric bleed that was caused by Motrin. Believe it or not, ibuprofen had caused a gastric ulcer to erode into a patient's stomach, into an underlying artery, and the patient basically had an arterial bleed in his stomach, and it was pretty horrific. So that's kind of my first understanding of like modern medicine and how unsafe it can be. Even something just like ibuprofen that you can get over the counter, if not taken properly. And it's a wonderful tool, but if it's not taken properly, it can actually kill you. So there's nothing, and mind you, the same mechanisms that of anti-inflammatory that NSAIDs use, cannabis uses too. So there are safer alternatives in plant medicine. My second duty station is when I transferred to my Marine Corps unit, Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. I am a global war on terror veteran, not a combat veteran. So I didn't see combat, but I took care of a lot of my Marines that did, post-combat Marines. And I saw a mentality shift in some of the guys. And then I deployed with a lot of those guys again later on in non-combat settings. But after they had come back from combat, the violence and violent mentality had just ramped up, and there was no way to deal with that. Actually, I was in a platoon that was disbanded for hazing down in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And if you know anything about the Marine Corps, hazing's almost an accepted part of the culture to an extent. So for them to get over the line of crossing the line to having to be disbanded, it got really bad. And that's kind of all I'll say about that. But I saw people doing a lot of things, and I was supposed to be there to protect my Marines, and I didn't. And so that kind of started weighing on me a lot about later things and things that I saw. Some of these guys that are in this picture that I showed y'all earlier were some of my close friends that had deployed with me in my first deployment in first platoon. They later deployed on to combat deployments in Iraq. A lot of those guys came back shot up or dead, or later on overdoses or suicide attempts and things like that. And some of them are really, I still keep in contact with some of these Marines today that are still struggling with opioid addiction. I also witnessed a lot of systematic problems in the VA. One of the things was when I was in my clinical rotation and training at the very beginning, we worked at a VA hospital and up in the Chicago area. I worked on a cardiovascular accident ward with veterans that had strokes, and they were various levels of care, but there was like medication abuse. They were just throwing medication at these guys. They were walking around drooling on themselves because that was the easiest way to take care of them. And I'm talking like one flew over a cuckoo's nest, like white walls, gowns hanging open in the back, and these, like it was bad. It was eye opening. We used to have to haul them down to the showers, in a group shower room, and basically hose them off like cattle to clean them up because they didn't have enough staff to get everybody properly cleaned with one-on-one care. And so this was the kind of stuff I saw. Like, I was only 19 when I saw that, and it was like, I don't ever want to end up in this place. That's all I knew. Also, just the red tape that's involved with the VA, and we're going to kind of get into that. Getting out of the military and trying to get your benefits and get into the system is its own set of problems. And then once again, that medication abuse, these doctors that just start slamming these vets with medications because they don't know what else to do. They don't have any other options. So there's the opioids and there's all kinds of other stuff that they dump on top of them. Well, I was lucky in the fact that when I got out of the military, I went straight back to cannabis. I didn't go to the VA, and it was part of my PTSD. I was actually avoiding the VA, but it was not to my detriment in this case, because had I got to the VA and fell into that, their SOPs, their protocols, which is kind of part of the problem. Vets are very used to following those protocols. So they're going to go to the people that they know are supposed to be there to help them, which is the VA. And then they get caught up into the system. I didn't do that. I actually didn't qualify for my benefits right off the bat. And then I started using cannabis right whenever I got out of the military, and it kind of sustained me. However, I still struggled. I wasn't dealing with my PTSD. So I had failed relationships, jobs. I didn't get a diagnosis. Like I said, I had dropped out of school. I was near homelessness a few times, and just had no community and very little support. And when you have like this toxic set of systems, that's when people really fall into the fray, because there's not anybody there to understand that they have to be there to kind of like keep them into the fray. Like, if we don't make places for wounded warriors in society, then that's what happens. So that's kind of the story there. After struggling for quite a bit, I ended up going to my first normal meeting at Houston Normal. They were working on a project to get veterans cannabis in Texas, and it was the first time I'd seen anybody work on my behalf, and it meant a lot. And I was like, and it was getting around other people that said, "This is my medicine," and I was like, "Wow, that's powerful." Because before it was like, you're a dirty pothead, and I would say, no, I need this. Trust me, y'all want me to have this. If I don't have this, things go bad. But there was all these stigmas attached, especially down here in the South. And but I wanted others to know that same message. So that changed a lot. That started giving me a voice and a path. It was an arduous path, but kind of coincided with a few things. I was doing my work at the Capitol in 2017. The psilocybin research from Johns Hopkins came out on mushrooms and medication resistant depression, and these astounding results. And because I have this medical background and healthcare background, I was like really into it. And it made sense to me because I went back to those days of dabbling around with psychedelics when I was a teenager. And I was like, when I took mushrooms, I just smiled from ear to ear, like, this is great. And it made sense to me. And then I also realized the mechanisms of action that work with the receptors that are also like your serotonin receptors and the whole thing. And it just made sense. And I was like, wow, okay. So of course I tried that, right away, as soon as I could get a hold of some. But also kind of coincided with this documentary that I saw that one of my veteran advocate brothers had put together, where they flew a group of veterans down to Peru, and they did an ayahuasca ceremony. And so they were able to go sit with the real Shipiba shaman and do this whole thing. And I watched the documentary, and I'm going to go ahead and forward that to that. And it was life-changing. And I knew right away, I was like, I got to sit with one of those shaman. And I knew I had to. And luckily for me, about several months later, that same shaman was, relocated somewhere closer to my home. We'll just leave it at that. And I was able to sit with that same shaman and do the same Shipibo ayahuasca ceremonies that they got to do down there. It wasn't the full dieta, because they go through a lot of other plant medicines that aren't psychedelics, that are like detoxifiers. But the ayahuasca part of it, I got to do, and a part of this tobacco ceremony as well. But Soldiers of the Vines on YouTube, y'all can check it out. It's free to watch. That's my boy in the top left corner, Ian. He's the one that kind of got me involved. And y'all can see some of the pictures around there from the ceremony. And then I just want to point out to the bottom right-hand corner, the guy in the middle, that's Barry. He was in the documentary. That's me to the right. And then to the left is Brian Ortega, who is on track B right now, teaching people how to grow weed. So you can see this community that was built. It's bigger than the medicine. This is giving us a sense of purpose and a mission again, which we're going to go through some of these other things, is highly important. So plant medicines can do more than just do the actual healing when you consume them. There's a community of non-judgmental, uplifting community that can kind of coincide in an integrative fashion, right? So I think that's really important. And then this picture was also taken at YALCON in Austin. We were there speaking about, what do you think? Veterans and plant medicine, and natural rights and the liberties that come with it. Because that's, we're putting the work in because it's that important to us. So we'll go into, what are plant medicines? This is a down and dirty. This is not by any measure an exhaustive list, but cannabis is a plant medicine, right? It is a psychedelic. Most people don't want to classify it as that, because psychedelics has gotten kind of like this dirty connotation in the US, and even some advocates are trying to separate it because they think that, like, if you attach it to psychedelia, then it's going to have some sort of that same negative connotation. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, in my opinion and on many others, it is a psychedelic. It reacts on the same mechanisms, a lot of the same mechanisms as some of these other drugs. So, I think it's also, to me, what I consider the mother plant. It's the medicine, it's the plant medicine that people have to get a hold of first, so that they can start to do the work. Because when you're talking about pain and when you're talking about PTSD, cannabis can help both of those things, right? I can treat my pain and I can treat my PTSD with one medicine, which is big, because we're talking about vets that get slammed with thousands, but a bunch of pills at once to try to treat these two things in a non-addictive and a safe, fashion. I mean, if you look at the laundry list of side effects that comes with something like even Prozac versus cannabis, I think the number one side effect for Prozac is erectile dysfunction, right? So you're going to treat my depression with that. I mean, that sucks. But another day, yeah. Another topic. And some of these other medicines. So I was going to say, in the sacred plant world, cannabis is referred to as Santa Maria. The Saint Mary. It is the mother plant. It is absolutely regarded as the highest plant. And we have a whole system in our body dedicated to it, to prove it. Then you have ayahuasca, which is like what I was talking about with my experience in the documentary. For those that aren't really, ayahuasca is a blend of two drugs where they use DMT, which is a psychoactive psychedelic, one of the most powerful that would normally not be activated if you just were to orally take it, because your stomach would actually just attack it and kill it. But the MAOI enhancer, not only does it enhance the effects in your brain, but it actually saves the medicine in your gut. And somehow the ancients knew this over 3,000 years ago. We learned about MAOIs in the 50s. Yeah. Yep. So, and it was one of the first drugs that they used to treat depression, as a matter of fact. So the classifications of drugs. So these are powerful. They're made from plants. There's a ton of plants out there that have MAOIs in them. Chocolate is one of them. Nutmeg, harmaline, so Syrian rue. There's just a few of them out there. There's passion flower. I grow it in my backyard. I can dry the leaves and the flowers, and I can throw it in my tea, and that's an actual natural MAOI. So really, really cool. And then, of course, the DMT comes from, I think it's over 90 something plants that they've identified that has DMT in it. But down in the Amazon, they have a couple of plants that they use to make the ayahuasca brew. And it's this really, really rich, deep, almost chocolatey type drink. And it's really great for purging traumas and connecting to the universe at large, feeling that interconnectivity of everything, if you will. There is a purging process. A lot of people, if you haven't seen that, it is intense. It's not a party drug by any means, but the thing that comes out of it, a lot of people would be scared not to do it because of the purge, but it's almost like the point of the thing. So kind of crazy. The 5-MeO DMT toad venom, not a plant. However, the 5-MeO DMT you can find in plants, just not as in larger enough quantities. So you can smoke the 5-MeO DMT toad venom. What I can tell you about that is particularly good at reaching in and grabbing trauma and ripping it out. It's also not a pleasant experience. In my experience, it was really, really hard. But rewarding.
In what way? Emotionally,
yeah. When other psychedelics bring, and it was described to me this way, and I really didn't understand until I tried, bring you outward. 5-MeO DMT brings you inward, and it's not a real visual experience. It's a very empathic experience. So you can feel your emotions in ways that you've never felt them before, and then they come out. And one of my friends said it felt like a black snake coming out of her mouth. You don't see the snake, but you do, but you feel it. It's really weird. And I felt like a black cloud, like a big huge fog just came out and filled the room. And once again, I couldn't see it, but I was imagining it almost so much that I could. It was kind of weird. You would think you're hallucinating, but you're not.
After that, do you feel relief that is out? That is,
I had to leave the room. I told him, get me out of the room, because I was scared that whatever it was, I didn't know what it was, but I didn't want it to come back. So yeah, huge relief once I got out of the room. I'm like, burn the sage, whatever it is, and it was powerful. The people that were in the room with me moved back. They moved back. They were like, whoa, whenever I started purging. And not everybody purges, but I think it's once you try the ayahuasca, it almost, for me anyways, it pushes me towards that with almost any of the other medications at high dosages. So, but that's just me. Not everybody.
Sure. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disrail you.
No, you're cool. And then the psychedelic cactus is, of course, the peyote, San Pedro. This one I actually don't have any experience with, but I can tell you it's a phenethylamine versus the others that are tryptamines. So this is in class like MDMA and also amphetamine. So it's a little bit more of an up, ooh, ooh, ooh kind of feel. Yeah, it's going to make you want to get up and dance and move around, where some of these other ones are going to want to slam you to the ground and make you lay there for a while. And then the psilocybin mushrooms, to me, this is an important one, up there with cannabis, because it's so easy to grow. It's so easy. It's cheap. It's easy to grow. Anybody could do it. I could teach a 5-year-old how to grow mushrooms. And I just learned by reading on the internet. And it's relatively safe. When some of these other drugs have a lot of contraindications with like the SSRIs and antidepressants that people are on, not that I'm advocating that people take them and the magic mushrooms, but the people feel a little more comfortable about the interaction. It has a smaller binding time to your receptors, so it doesn't last as long, especially as things like LSD is what they're finding, that binds to your receptor and just stays there for hours and hours and actually keeps anything else from kind of getting in there. So that's why LSD trips can kind of go on for maybe like 12 hours at a time, where magic mushrooms, I mean, even like a 10-gram dose could go away in 6 hours. So those are, to me, just like the basics probably everybody might know or have heard of. By the way, don't lick the toad, the Bufo alvararis toad. Don't lick the toad. It'll make you sick. They actually dry it and smoke it. So
that's one of my questions I wrote down. How do they extract the DMT from the toad?
Oh, you see the gland on the back of its neck, and then they squeeze it against a piece of plexiglass, and then they leave it there until it dries, and then they scrape it off.
So they don't have to kill the toad.
No, matter of fact, it's a very respected process. Yeah, if the indigenous people are doing it and not, dumb anybody because they only come out once a year during the rainy season, and yeah, it's this whole thing. There's also synthetic 5-MeO DMT out there that you don't have to get from a toad. Surprisingly, smells exactly the same. It's really weird. Yeah. Anyways, so those are the basic plant medicines. Of course, LSD I didn't mention. I mentioned, but also comes from fungus. So we're kind of lopping that in with plants, even though it's a different kingdom. Okay, I know. MDMA comes from sassafras. A lot of people don't know that. So, Molly, ecstasy, that kind of stuff we're going to talk about a little bit more. We're going to go back to vets and the problems vets are facing. We have military culture and stigmas, no access and denials, red tape, not enough effective treatment options, too much pain, emotional trauma, moral, spiritual wounds, lost community mission, and how plant medicines can help. So we'll go to just real quick, military culture. A lot of people think they know it, but they don't. When you walk around every day going kill, 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 it changes your brain. Pain is weakness leaving the body. That's a big one. You hear a lot. And suck it up and drive on. So these are just kind of painting a picture of how weakness is treated in the military. Mission readiness is always the biggest portion, like the biggest goal, the mission before everything. So service before self is always important. So you can understand why somebody that's suffering from depression might not, go and say, hey, I think I need some help, because its weakness is preyed upon. There's pretty much a bully mentality when it comes to weakness, because it could be the difference between life or death. And so they take it really serious. Also, if you do decide that you want to get a psychological evaluation, if you want to go see somebody for some help, they say at least in the Navy and Marine Corps, it's called going to see the wizard. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, like, oh, you're going to go see the wizard, are you? He's going to fix you right up, and it's real sarcastic. And then if they do go, then they're labeled a broke dick. All right. So that's just a term that, like, you can't do your job and you can't function. And so basically you're discarded as broken equipment. You're broken equipment now. And that's how you're treated. Med boards are the process that they use to get you out of the military if you have a medical problem, and they're there for a reason, and they're necessary because, guys get really hurt and severely injured, and sometimes their PTSD is so bad that they probably shouldn't be in the military anymore. But now I just found out the Army active duty now, if they ask for a psychological evaluation, they're automatically entered into a med board process. So basically their career is at jeopardy just for asking for a psychological evaluation. Correct.
Wow.
And I know somebody that's happening to currently. So that's how I know it for fact. And then there's the Veterans Health Administration as a whole. That is something we have to deal with. The VHA down and dirty. This is everything, red tape. The benefits aren't actually guaranteed. So like I was talking about, I had to apply 4 times before I got my disability. It was actually Obamacare that got me my access, because they had I was going to get charged. I was going to have to pay a fine for not having insurance. And so I had to write like a hardship request, like, please let me have this. And they granted it to me. Later on, I finally filed my disability, but they don't have assistance for disability. So I didn't even know I really probably qualified from disability from day one, because I just didn't want to be that. I was that guy that was like living in that, I don't want to be weak. I'm mentally strong. I can, just do my thing. I was trying to run marathons and like stay in shape, and like that was going to save me. And then just the limited treatment options at the VA. A lot of off-label prescriptions, the opioids we talked about, ineffective psychotropics that aren't even for PTSD, antipsychotics, they'll give you those because when nothing else works, and then the sleeping pills to help you sleep because they've dumped all the drugs on you. And then what liver, right? Because at this point, who cares? One of my Marines that was in one of those pictures, was a law enforcement in Arizona, and he was admitted to the hospital in a coma for liver failure from the VA scripts that were given him as an ER doctor in Arizona, a legal state, that said, hey man, you might want to try cannabis. And he's like, bro, I'm a cop, I can't do that. And he was like, well, do you want to die of liver failure? And so he retired and started using cannabis and got off all of his medications. The services, we're going to talk about this, the iatrogenic drug addiction, which is like when you go to the doctor and they prescribe you an addiction. Hospital police force response. My hospital has a police force, and they're there all the time. I had one guy I know that went in because he was having some anxiety issues. He was met at the emergency room by the police force, and because of course he freaked out a little bit, and he's former LEO as well. He freaked out a little bit, and they ended up cuffing him and admitting him to the 6th floor psychiatric unit at the hospital. So he went to the ER and ended up getting cuffed. And then ultimately increased risk of overdose and suicide. And we're going to get into that. And so it's a government entity. And so in my opinion, it is a highly corrupt institution with vast systemic problems, and is everything you would expect in government ran healthcare. These are a few slides we're just going to cover real quick. This just shows that not only do vets have more pain, it's more severe. So we deal with more pain in more places, and it's more severe. And don't worry, everybody's going to catch up with us in pain. If you look in the middle graphic, by the age of 70, y'all overtake us. But I think that's because most of the veterans that were living in pain are dead by then. So there you go. It's not just pain that's the problem. This is chronic pain in veterans. Also the comorbidities of PTSD and traumatic brain injury, TBI. Okay, if you see that big chunk in the circle, those are the vets living with all three. That's the majority. We're talking about the post Middle East conflict. That's my age, right? So anywhere between today to 20 years ago. And then this one's the one that really gets me. If you actually look at this is the odds ratio overdose suicide related events. This comes from the VA. These are their graphics. Healthcare utilization is actually what will give you 23% 23 times more likely to kill yourself. So if you want to paint the picture of what this veteran looks like, the veteran had PTSD and chronic pain and TBI, right? Because that was the majority that we just looked at. They go in to get treatment. They're already 2.6 times more likely for overdose and suicide related events because we're higher risk for addiction. Okay. We go in to get our pain treated and the doctor gives us opioids. Okay. Knowing that we're high risk for addiction and knowing that it can't treat chronic pain. And then there's this other thing that happens when you take opioids that it actually makes your pain worse. So not only does it make your pain worse, then your tolerance goes up. So they have to just keep increasing the dose up and up and up until there's a point where you hit the max level dose, right? So at that point, that veteran is going to have choices. They're going to live in pain and still eating a bunch of opioids. They're going to start weaning themselves off of opioids and live in pain. Or they're going to go to the black market and move to a harder substance, which is what happened to a lot of people, right? At that point, you're at the substance use disorder category. Now you're 8 times more likely for overdose or suicide-related events. In this topic, we're not really distinguishing the two because overdose is basically suicide as well. And drug addiction is suicide, long-term suicide.
Right.
So once you're at that point, then you're going to turn back to the VA for help because now you're addicted to drugs. That's when they're going to send you through the detox program. And that's when you're going to hit that far right 18.5% statistic or times statistic. If you make it through the detox process, you're likely to relapse. And when you relapse, you're likely to overdose. And if you overdose, then you've already actually become part of the statistic, but 23.1 times they're going to admit you into the inpatient treatment facility at that point. And that's at the point when you're going to have been ran all the way through the system and come out 23 times more likely to kill yourself. So what does this mean for y'all? Why should civilians care? Not only, just because we're humans and we should care about these things. Our lives aren't more important than civilian lives. I don't believe that. But they're my people, so they're who I'm fighting for, right? But I'm also fighting for everyone else because y'all have loved ones that are vets, brothers of, sisters of, husbands, wives of, mothers of, uncles, daughter, cousins, whatever. We all have a veteran in our life, and most of them could be suffering, right? So these understandings about trauma today came from studying high-risk individuals in a systematic way. They get rolled out to the public, okay? And those understandings lead to new research and breakthrough, okay? Those individuals are veterans because the VA does do one thing well. They study us very well. Because we're a very controlled group of people. So we realize that we're not the only ones dealing with these issues, and we can help in stigmas about both mental health and drug use. Psychedelic medicine is about integration, and integration means working together. So like I said, finding places in society for vets and those sort of things. These are a few of the things that have been used to study on vets that are now being rolled out to the general public. The big one that we'll talk about here is the MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. The results from the MAPS phase 3 study just came out this week. And that's it right there. Interim analysis shows at least 90% chance of statistically significant difference in PTSD symptoms after MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. This was initially conducted on veterans, and then phase 2 spread it out to the general public. Okay, so I've met a few of the vets that were involved with that. Also, the neurology, they're showing the PTSD brain pattern differences. They're actually the physical damages to the organ that is your brain. It's not just a all in your head situation. Liberty as a treatment option. Not only is psychedelics good for creating these communities, helping with healing these wounds, where I can use these medications at my will, and treat myself as I go. And I'm not advocating for any, we'll get into that, but, psychotherapy is important too. Like the MDMA assisted psychotherapy is beneficial for a reason. People are getting things off their chest that they weren't able to talk about before. And so that's liberty, that's freedom. But not only do psychedelics, fall in line with this idea of liberty and ending the drug war and all these good things that we could talk about, free markets and all kinds of cool stuff. It also is falling in line with progressive modern medicine. Okay, these are some of these things that are kind of coming along out of healthcare right now. Patient autonomy is a big one. So making health decisions without influence from physicians or insurance companies or government. I mean, what could be more liberating than going to the doctor and being able to say, I want to try ayahuasca, and they say, I gotcha. Informed consent, that's knowing all the risks and benefits of each treatment. Imagine that veteran that would have gone in and known that if he would have followed that path of healing that the veteran had to offer the VA, that it was going to end up with 23 times more likely for them killing themselves. Would they have taken that pill? I don't think they would have. I wouldn't have, but at least they would have had that knowledge. And if they took that pill, that was their choice. Shared decision making, communicating with everyone involved with your wellness, getting as much info, and making the best decisions for you. I mean, this goes in line with free information, and having the ability to figure out what is best for yourself and your community, and having people around you to support that decision, including your healthcare practitioners. Then evidence-based practice. This is combining clinical expertise, current evidence, and patient values to influence decision-making. This is like using my word as this is a treatment option as a treatment option, because it's not just my word. We could document these results all day. We could take veterans down. We could do PTSD surveys before and after. We could take them down to Peru. We could run these treatments, and we can bring them back, and we could have the results. I know the results. I've seen the results. Not just with ayahuasca, but with things like yoga, meditation, Tai Chi. I actually work with another organization, and we do a lot of those modalities too. And I've seen the before and after results, and they're off the charts. And if you look at the results for like the VA's most empirically supported thing is is prolonged exposure. They have a 50% dropout rate. So when you're talking about 50% won't even finish the treatment, and that's their best bet. So these are some of the things that we can have as tools to help us move forward in medicine and healthcare. And then I'm just going to kind of leave y'all with this. What is more of an industry disruptor than taking care of your own mental health and physical health needs? I am not advocating for replacing your physician. I'm simply advocating for being your best patient advocate. In the information asymmetry of medicine, by learning how the human body and available treatment options work, get involved in changing the bad laws surrounding medicines that could sustainably be grown and consumed at home. The ancients knew these medicines work, and we should end the stifling of the access to these medicines and the information and research surrounding them. And then I'll leave you on my shameless self-promotion slide as well. That's what I'm doing with my business. I want to try to connect people to these modalities and these understandings, give people information, like teach a man to fish kind of mentality, where people can come in and learn about their body systems from professional people and how these mind-body spiritual things work. So.
Well, that's awesome. I think that is great, because there are so many people who don't understand. The second you bring up magic mushrooms or psychedelics in any sort of way, they whoa, back up. So that's one of the things I kind of wanted to circle back to. When you talked about cannabis being a psychedelic, how and why does that qualify as a psychedelic?
Well, first, because of the way that it works in your body, especially with your CB1 receptor system, how it has like that dopamine production effect that helps. It's the same thing. Like when you take mushroom. It fits into your receptors like serotonin, so it's naturally matching your own mind's neurotransmitters. And so it's just hacking your mind basically into thinking that it has more serotonin than it really does. And that's the effect that you're feeling. It's not the actual medication. So just because of the way it reacts, once you start the work, and you have to, I mean, big doses of cannabis in concentrate form and things like that, you can find yourself inducing psychedelic states as well.
Sure, but it takes, unlike Hollywood would have us believe, smoking a joint is not going to make you see anything.
No, no auditory hallucinations or anything like that. We're just talking only in a very scientific definition of the term.
The chemical reactors. Okay,
Right.
so I love talking about all this. I obviously have had my fair share of dealing with the different psychedelics and cannabis in my day. So it was very interesting hearing you talk about how this helps people, especially vets. And that just warms my heart that there's a new treatment that you guys can take advantage of that's not going to destroy your body.
Yeah.
If you want to commit suicide, I wanted to ask if you think that there is any, as far as microdosing and taking a regular dose of psilocybin mushrooms, do you think there's any benefit to microdosing?
Oh, absolutely. It got me through college.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was, honor student at that. I absolutely, yes. Microdosing mushrooms and LSD has been really effective, not just for me. I know a lot of people that are using mushrooms to wean off of their SSRIs. So because you can't just stop taking your antidepressants, so they'll kind of turn the dial up on one and start turning the dial down on the other at the same time, and eventually, it takes a couple of weeks. That's it, but it's much easier on the system. Yeah.
Yeah, I've also taken the antidepressants, and coming off of those, going on, coming off, it's not, none of it's fun and none of it's easy.
And I was one of these people that the antidepressants, like they always say, oh, give it a couple weeks and then it'll normalize. And it would never normalize for me. They would start me off on very low dosages, but my biochemistry just couldn't take them. And so I tried it. I mean, even as an adult, I tried to go back to the medicines at some point, and I couldn't do it.
Well, I'm so glad that, there's this available, and I will definitely look into your total wellness stuff here, because I can never learn enough about this.
Yeah. And that's the thing is we'll have a lot of good information coming out on the website as well. Like right now it's kind of bare bones, but I do have an affiliation agreement through Pure Prescriptions. So if you click through my website and get to theirs, they have top-notch, they're the #1 supplement brand in the country. That purchase will help build my business and also help support these organizations that I'm trying to support that are doing hands-on work. One of them is called Vet Trip, where you walk in the door and they have chiropractors, massage therapists, acupuncturists, EFT tapping, aromatherapy, Reiki masters, and the whole nine. They're there doing like this one-stop shop body energy treatment on you. And it's amazing. It's just an astounding experience.
Well,
So
thank you
those are the
so
kinds
much.
of things I want to get people to.
Awesome. I look forward to hearing more about it, and I'm sure we will talk more again sometime. I will probably have you on my show, and
Yeah,
we'll talk
awesome.
offline for sure. So thanks for coming on and being part of the first Taxationist Stuff Fest.
I was supposed to say thank y'all for having me, and I think I forgot because I was like a little nervous at the beginning, but really appreciate Dan Berman and everybody in the team for having me. So appreciate y'all. Good to meet you, Dre.
Absolutely. All right, guys, give us a couple minutes. We'll be right back with Sam Robb. Go and do thou likewise.